Hello, there is a criminal who comes and goes without leaving a trace, wandering the streets at night looking for targets. After committing his crimes, he vanishes like a ghost. Over the span of 20 years, this ghost has caused numerous cases that have left the public in panic. In the United States, there is a highway named US 20, abbreviated as Route 20. This highway stretches from Newport, Oregon in the west to Boston, Massachusetts in the east. Route 20 was constructed in 1926 and spans a total length of 5,415 kilometers, passing through 11 states, with the portion in Oregon being 726 kilometers long. In the middle of Oregon lies a county named Jefferson. In the 1970s, a series of disappearances occurred along Route 20 in Jefferson County. The police made efforts to investigate and monitor for a long period, but were unable to find the perpetrator. On December 24, 1978, which was a Sunday and Christmas Eve at around 10 a.m., the Jefferson police received a call from a man. He reported that his wife went out for a jog in the morning but had not returned. He had tried to contact her and search nearby but couldn't find her. Fearing something might have happened, he called the police for assistance. Upon receiving the call, the police quickly arrived at the location provided by the man. His name was Noel Turner, and his wife, Kay Turner, was 35 years old with shoulder-length, curly blonde hair, currently working at a medical facility. The couple was not local but came from Eugene, Oregon. With Christmas approaching, they decided to travel from Eugene to Sherman Camp in Jefferson County for the holiday. Sherman Camp is located on Route 20 near a river. The camp has shops, hotels, and various recreational spots. Approximately 200 residents live there, with many tourists visiting for camping during the holidays. On December 23rd, the couple arrived at Sherman Camp, had dinner with others that evening, and stayed overnight. Kay had a habit of jogging in the morning. The next morning, she wore a t-shirt underneath, a green long-sleeved shirt on top, and yellow shorts, intending to jog around the camp. Before starting, she invited a friend to join her but was declined. She then told her husband she would be back in an hour and they could have breakfast together before starting her jog alone along the camp road. Since she often jogged alone in the morning, her husband didn't worry initially. However, after a few hours, he still hadn't seen her return. Concerned, he drove around the camp searching for her but couldn't find her, so he called the police. Kay was an adult and had been missing for less than 3 hours, so the police conducted a simple investigation near the camp and suggested that her husband wait a bit longer. They believed she might have gone out for some personal matter and could return soon. After that, the police left. However, her husband and their friend did not give up. They continued searching near the camp, but still couldn't find her. On December 26, 1978, 2 days had passed and Kay was still missing. The police returned to the camp to continue their investigation. After interviewing all the local residents, they discovered a clue. A witness named Thomas Hanna, a road worker living at Sherman Camp, provided some information. On the night before Kay went missing, he worked the night shift at the construction site. The next morning, while driving home, he saw a girl jogging along the road near the camp. It was likely Kay. He was driving in the opposite direction, so he didn't know where she went afterward. On his way, he saw a colleague of his driving towards the jogging girl, so perhaps that colleague saw her. While investigating near the camp, a search party found 2 sets of footprints, one large and one small, along with drag marks in the mud at the side of the road. The smaller footprints matched Kay's shoe size, while the larger ones were from a man's military boots. The overlapping footprints suggested a struggle between the 2 individuals. The police speculated that Kay might have encountered a man there who then subdued her and dragged her away. They then questioned the residents and visitors at the camp from that day. On January 11th, 1979, 18 days after the incident, the police tracked down the colleague mentioned by witness Thomas Hanna. His name was John Aykroyd, a 28-year-old who stated that he had also worked the night shift the night before the incident and had driven home at 6:30 a.m. After returning home, John planned to go hunting in the woods, so he drove along Route 20 near Sherman Camp. That morning, he also saw a girl jogging but wasn't sure if it was Kay. Furthermore, his car ran out of gas, so he went to a nearby gas station without paying much attention to the girl. Later, John returned to the camp and went hunting in the woods with a friend. John was believed to be the last person to see Kay. Upon investigating Kay's personal relationships, the police found a clue. Before Kay went missing, she and her husband frequently argued because he suspected she was cheating on him. The investigation revealed that Kay had an extramarital affair and their marriage was very strained. Strangely, despite this tension, they still decided to spend Christmas together. The police considered her husband a suspect, but prioritized finding Kay first. Kay's family offered a reward for information leading to her whereabouts, but it was unsuccessful. The police couldn't find any more witnesses and the investigation stalled. 8 months later, on August 8th, 1979, the owner of a shop at Sherman Camp was taking a nap when he was abruptly awakened by a man rushing in. The shop owner recognized the man. It was John, the last witness to see Kay. John reported that while hunting rabbits in a nearby area, he unexpectedly found human remains which might belong to Kay, who had been missing for the 8 months, and asked the shop owner to call the police. Shortly after, the police arrived at the shop, and John led them to a spot in the woods where they indeed found a piece of yellow fabric and a human skeleton. Upon examination, the skeleton was confirmed to be Kay's. The discovery site was only 800 meters from where the footprints were found. Expanding their search, the police found her yellow, shorts, green shirt, underwear, shoes, and other personal items. Additionally, they discovered a tuft of her hair and a bird's nest in a tree and a watch. The watch's hands were stopped at 9:27 a.m. on December 24th. Being a quartz watch, only 3 possibilities could cause the hands to stop: a dead battery, being manually stopped, or physical damage. After the police checked the watch, they found that the crown hadn't been pulled out and the battery was still functional, so the watch had stopped due to physical damage. Based on this, the police deduced that the time of Kay's murder was the morning of her disappearance. At the scene, the police found a piece of yellow shorts with a flat edge, as if someone had cut it, and the green shirt had a puncture indicating she was likely stabbed before she died. The police then raised significant suspicions about John and continued to interrogate him. However, in this interview, he changed his story. John admitted that he discovered Kay about 2 months after her disappearance. He confessed that he had found her at that time but was afraid to call the police immediately, fearing increased suspicion as he was the last person to see her. To avoid trouble, he decided not to report it right away. The police didn't believe his story and knew that John had a criminal record for theft in his youth. After that, he joined the military as a mechanic. After being discharged, he found work as a mechanic, repairing cars on the road or assisting stranded drivers. This wasn't the first time John was suspected in a case. A year earlier, he had been involved in another case in Deschutes County, Oregon. Deschutes County, with a population of about 110,000, borders Jefferson County, where Kay's case occurred. The previous summer, a girl named Marlene Gabrielson and her husband traveled from Lebanon, Oregon, to a campsite in Deschutes, Oregon, near Route 20 for a vacation. The distance between the two locations is about 140 kilometers. That evening, the couple went to a campsite to watch horse racing. During the intermission, they argued over trivial matters. Marlene had given birth to their daughter 3 months earlier, so they had left the baby with a friend and went on vacation together. After the argument, Marlene missed her daughter and wanted to go home, so she decided to hitchhike on Route 20. Her husband was angry and didn't stop her. By then it was late and only a few cars were on the road. Marlene waved at several cars, but none stopped. She waited for a long time and finally saw a truck approaching, so she waved at it. The truck slowed down and stopped. The passenger told her they were heading to Lebanon, and if she didn't mind, she could sit in the front with them. Since it was late and no other cars had stopped, Marlene thought this was her chance and decided to get in. The driver, none other than John, the main suspect in Kay's case. By chance, she saw behind his seat a rifle and a hunting knife stuck in an old coffee can near the driver's seat. Having had some alcohol earlier, Marlene quickly fell asleep. An hour later, Marlene woke up to find the truck off Route 20 on a small road, stopping in a remote area. John pulled out the knife, threatened her not to move, and dragged her into the woods where he assaulted her. Afterward, John looked at Marlene and said, "I don't know what to do with you." Marlene, terrified, stammered, "My baby is less than a year old. Please let me go home." John fell silent for a moment, then told Marlene to get back in the truck. The truck eventually stopped in an area in Sweet Home, Oregon, not far from Lebanon. John left her in the truck and went into a house. Marlene, sitting alone in the truck, didn't run away because she thought it was his house and wanted to remember the house number to call the police once she was safe. However, it was late and the area outside the truck was pitch dark, so she couldn't see the house number clearly. A while later, John returned, but Marlene was not afraid at all and even showed delight in John, and they began to chat. He gradually let his guard down and gave her his phone number. Afterwards, John dropped her off near her mother-in-law's house and drove away. When she saw John leaving, she immediately went to her mother-in-law's house and told her about what had just happened and asked her to call the police. She herself then went to the hospital to get evidence of John's criminal acts. After receiving the report, the police quickly found John based on the clues provided by Marlene, but he claimed that that night she had been drinking and seduced him into the car and the two of them had only had consensual relations. Marlene again stated that John had attacked her, evidenced by the injuries on her body, the torn clothing, and the presence of semen. Faced with two completely different statements, the police did not know who to believe, so they proceeded to conduct a lie detector test on both of them. The results showed that John had passed the test successfully, but Marlene had failed. Due to the lack of evidence, the prosecutor did not charge John. 1 year after the Kay case occurred, the final witness was John. He said that on the day Kay went missing, he had gone to work at 6:30 in the morning and then traveled to the Sherman camp. On the way, John had seen Kay running in the morning. At the Sherman camp, there was a man named Roger Beck, John's friend. He said that on that day, the two of them had gone hunting in the forest and had been together during that time. Based on this information, the police approached Pam Ramirez, Roger's wife. She said that on the day of the incident between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, John and her husband were only near the house and did not go anywhere else. The police estimated that Kay was murdered at 9:27 a.m. that day, but during this time, John had an alibi provided by Roger and his wife. Due to insufficient evidence to prosecute John, the case remained unsolved. 11 years after Kay's case, on the morning of July 11th, 1990, the local police received a call about the disappearance of 13-year-old Rachanda Pickle. Rachanda's mother, Linda Munville, and her ex-husband had 2 children, a boy and a girl. She was currently living with her new husband and the 2 children. They resided in an area called Santiam Junction, near Route 20, a very remote place with the nearest store a 30-minute drive away. Many road workers lived in this area. Upon receiving the call, the police quickly arrived at the scene and discovered that Rachanda had gone missing the previous day. She had woken up very early, and before leaving the house, her mother had asked her to complete some chores. Afterward, her mother and stepfather went out, and her brother was also not at home. Rachanda, 13 years old, was left alone at home watching TV. By the evening, when her mother and stepfather returned, they found her missing, with everything in the house still in place and neatly arranged. In her room, her mother found an open suitcase containing some clothes, cosmetics, and personal hygiene items. Rachanda had not even completed the chores her mother had assigned before leaving. Usually, she was very obedient, diligent, and always did her chores. If she visited neighbors, she would always ask for permission, but on that day, she had not done any of these things and was nowhere to be found. Growing increasingly worried, her mother feared something terrible had happened. She picked up the phone to call the police, but her husband stopped her. Her current husband was none other than John, the main suspect in Kay's case. John told her that missing persons reports had to wait 24 hours before being filed. Otherwise, the police wouldn't dispatch officers to investigate. However, since Rachanda was a minor, the police would have responded immediately upon receiving the call. Her mother seemed unaware of this and believed her husband, so she did not call the police until the next day. After examining the entire house, the police found no signs of violence. During the investigation, John seemed indifferent to his stepdaughter's safety and even chatted cheerfully with others about her height, weight, and beauty. This reaction was not typical of someone with a missing loved one, raising significant suspicion towards John. He claimed that on the day Rachanda disappeared, he had taken a day off from work because some necessary parts for his job had not arrived. That day, upon returning home, he saw Rachanda sitting on the sofa watching TV and invited her to take photos with the wild deer nearby, but she refused. John then went out, and when he returned, she was gone. He was the last person to see her. The police then visited John's workplace. Some workers there said that besides his regular repairs, John had other tasks that day, but he insisted on taking the day off. The police also questioned nearby neighbors and learned from a woman that on that morning while working near Route 20, she saw John driving his truck past. He returned 2 hours later. The woman encountered John twice, greeting him each time. The first time he ignored her as if he had something urgent to deal with. The second time when he returned, he waved back. The case of Rachanda occurred in Lynn County, Oregon, while Kay's case took place in Jefferson County, neighboring counties. The Jefferson County police had long suspected something was wrong with John, but could not find evidence. After Rachanda's disappearance, they became more convinced that Kay's case 12 years ago was connected to him. John had been removed from the suspect list because his friend Roger and Roger's wife had provided an alibi for him. A few years after Kay's case, Roger and his wife divorced. Pam Rogers' ex-wife had moved to California, and investigators decided to go there to find her. When asked about Kay's case, Pam candidly admitted she had lied and revealed the truth. 12 years earlier, on the morning Kay disappeared, John and Pam's husband had breakfast at home and then went hunting in the woods, returning the next morning. When they returned, Pam saw their clothes were covered in blood and they were wearing brand new army boots. They asked her to burn the clothes and boots. At that time, the entire Sherman camp knew Kay was missing. Her husband claimed they had mistaken Kay for a deer and accidentally killed her. If the police found out, they would be arrested, so he told her not to reveal anything. Pam was terrified but managed to keep calm and provided alibis for both men. Later, Pam's husband confessed that they did not accidentally kill Kay but did it intentionally. This revelation horrified her even more, as she realized she had been living with a monster. A few years later, they divorced, and she mentioned that her ex-husband was an alcoholic. Whenever he got drunk, he would talk about how he and John murdered Kay, so his family knew about it. This breakthrough was significant, but Pam's testimony alone was not enough to convict John, so investigators continued to search for more evidence. 2 years after Rachanda's case in 1992, John changed jobs and moved to live with his mother in Sweet Home. Over the next 2 years, the police investigated him multiple times but found no additional evidence. Shortly after, another disappearance occurred near Route 20. On May 2, 1992, 2 girls named Melissa Sanders and Sheila Swanson went camping with their family at Beverly Beach State Park, a beach on the central Oregon coast near Route 20. The family decided to camp there overnight, and the next morning they found the 2 girls missing from their tent. Initially, they thought the girls were just out playing, but after a few days of no contact, the family reported them missing to the police. Upon investigation, the police discovered that on the night they disappeared, the girls had called their boyfriends asking to be picked up and taken home to Sweet Home, but their boyfriends refused. The girls then told them they would hitch a ride and they were never seen again. It was known that the 2 girls often visited a restaurant in Lebanon, and the police suspected they might have gone there that night. Further investigation revealed that John, the suspect in Kay's and Rachanda's cases, frequently visited that restaurant. He might have encountered the girls there. With sufficient evidence collected, the police arrested John. 15 years after Kay's case, it finally went to trial. One woman testified that on the day Kay disappeared, she was riding her bike near the Sherman camp and saw John parked by the roadside holding a gun and threatening Kay. Terrified, she quickly rode away. Roger's wife also testified in court. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury concluded that John was guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment with no parole for 20 years. His friend Roger was also convicted of first-degree murder and received the same sentence. Both men denied their guilt, and John never revealed Rachanda's whereabouts to the police. Subsequent investigations revealed that John might have been involved in other cases, but due to a lack of evidence, he was not prosecuted. In September 1993, a hunter unexpectedly discovered the bodies of 2 girls in a forest in Sweet Home. The bodies were unclothed, with one girl's legs tied and wearing sneakers and socks, while the other girl had parts of her body missing, likely taken by animals. Due to the advanced decomposition, the coroner could not determine the exact cause of death, but speculated that the victims might have died from suffocation. The bodies were identified as Melissa and Sheila, who had disappeared 4 months earlier. Nearby, an old rivet and a beaded cushion were found. Due to the lack of clues, the case became a cold case. 20 years later, in 2012, investigators reopened the Melissa and Sheila case, finding John's former colleagues who confirmed that John knew Melissa and Sheila. When Melissa and her group discussed camping plans, John had invited them to a party near the campsite. Investigators also found that when the 2 girls were discovered, they found a used rivet and a beaded cushion. Rivets were carried by highway workers, and beaded cushions were often used by these workers during summer driving. After the girls disappeared, someone saw John with blood-stained arms in a store. The police visited the store and found the employee who had witnessed John. The employee stated that on the night the girls disappeared, he was on duty at a store near the highway and suddenly heard a truck pull up outside. Looking out, he saw John with blood-stained arms and hands. John told the employee he had hit a deer and chased it away, then cleaned up and went home. Based on the clues, investigators speculated that after leaving the park, the girls walked along Highway 101. At the intersection of Highway 101 and Route 20, they encountered John driving by. He offered them a ride, then drove them into the forest to commit his crimes. Investigators examined all 3 cases and found similarities. None of the victims were buried after being killed, and each time John had an alibi involving animals or hunting. He also had rest periods before and after each crime. Although prosecutors believed they had enough evidence to convict John, he was already in prison and the case was shelved due to costs and other reasons. Later, police reopened the investigation into Rachanda's disappearance. After gathering sufficient evidence, police filed new murder charges against John in April 2014. He neither admitted nor denied the charges. By the end of 2016, John died suddenly of a heart attack in prison at the age of 67. Investigators searched John's cell for clues about Rachanda's disappearance, but found nothing. John had committed many crimes throughout his life, escaping legal punishment in the same way each time. Among his victims, only Marlene survived. John's psychological strength was so strong that he could deceive a lie detector. Without this, the series of tragic cases might not have happened so frequently. What are your thoughts on today's case? Comment below to discuss, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.